This is In Touch with Terry, a power-packed podcast for the medical aesthetics industry.
I just discovered your podcast, and I feel like I've hit a gold mine.
This is someone who's got a lot of knowledge. She's been there, done that.
Terry Ross is a former Fortune 500 executive, international speaker, founder and co-CEO of Apex Platform, and Terry Ross Consulting.
Just listening to her energy and her passion and just how hardcore she is.
Her knowledge of the industry and just her connections in general are phenomenal.
In Touch with Terry will bring you solutions to increase operational and employee efficiency and practice profitability. Plus, feature some of the top industry experts as guests.
The Apex team literally changed the game for us.
Terry, your courses and your podcast are just so helpful.
She made me feel like I could do this.
3, 2, 1.
Here we go!
Now, here's Terry.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of In Touch with Terry. And I am super duper excited to have our guest today. He is a friend, an industry leader in a topic that is really, really hot right now. I feel like there's not a day that goes by that I do not get asked, when should I sell my place? How do I sell it? Am I ready to sell it? Who do I go to? Who do I talk to? So my amazing friend and guest today is Dan Schachter, the CEO of Cosmetic Physician Partners, CPP from Canada. Dan, welcome, honey, to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Terry. Couldn't be more excited to be here with you today.
Oh, you are so welcome. Let me just shed a little bit of Dan's background, and then I'll have him elaborate a little bit more. But, you know, this is an episode you're really not going to want to miss. So please, if you're taking a walk, if you're sitting down, you know, grab a glass of wine, water, a pen and paper. We're really going to get into some really hot topics with somebody that I admire and respect. But Dan, again, is the CEO of CPP. They're one of the largest partnerships of med spas and plastic surgery practices in the nation, with over 30 locations to date. We'll dive in a little bit deeper. And CPP's leadership team has been in the industry a very, very long time, having built one of Canada's largest and highest rated med spa networks, Victoria Park. So I really believe this group stands out amongst the rest for their quality of practices, their leadership, really their structure and what they believe in. And they have worked with some incredible practices such as Jay Burns, Joel Cohen, Matt and Kathy Toronto. I think that what you'll find too, because there's a lot of places, a lot of choices, and it's hard to navigate. And we're going to work through some of those things today with Dan. But you know, the level of control and support that they provide to their clinic partners, and again, just a Canadian way of doing things. So Dan, again, so excited to have you. I know we had you at our 4S Summit on the panel. We certainly refer tons of clients to you guys. So welcome. And you really are just an inspiration and just a freaking smarty pants in the space. So you know, if you could, Dan, tell us a little bit, you know, of your background and, you know, a little history of your background and how you ended up really getting into the space.
Well, first off, Terry, thanks so much for the introduction. We could not be more excited to be on the show. It's an exciting time in the industry. There's a lot of activity, but there's also a lot of questions. So if we can help, you know, elaborate and give some color on that, then job well done. And hopefully that's helpful to your audience on this one. So my background is, you know, not directly from this sector. I have an accounting and finance background by trade. I was schooled at both McGill University up in Canada, and then have a master's from Oxford in the United Kingdom. And I very much come from a data world, and that's, you know, an area that I focused on. And I've been doing, you know, running businesses for the last almost 15 years now, and was approached by two of my good friends and mentors, Jeff Hart and Jeff Bakewitz, who run Victoria Park up in Canada. And they wanted someone who's run a lot of businesses, who brings a data-backed approach to help lead the new iteration in the United States. So that's how, you know, I find myself in this position. One of the cool parts about this is, you know, as a group, we've been doing this for over 15 years. It's been extremely successful, both financially, but even more importantly on the people side. And that's something that we also spent an exorbitant amount of time on. So, you know, you can use data not just for making money, but you can use it to make sure employees are happy, to make sure people feel valued, to make sure that people are communicating up what they think. And that's a big part of this industry. I'm sure everyone who owns a clinic or knows about a clinic has had some people issues, and that's the other side of us that is really. So that's the balance we trade off on. We spend a lot of time on data, we spend a lot of time on people, and it's been magical. Yeah.
I mean, again, such an impressive background. I'm curious, having an accounting and a finance and a data-driven background in your master's, when you were approached by the folks at Victoria Park, when you started looking at this industry, because it's very simple to say, this is a hot commodity, it's retail medicine, it's cash, it's growing. But what aha moments did you sort of have yourself where you were like, this is really a market or an industry I want to play in?
It's interesting because I had just come off selling my last company. We sold to a New York hedge fund for $500 million, so $500 million. So when I looked at this business, I had, the hindsight of having just done another business and seeing how it works and what made it successful, what didn't make it, where we had challenges. And there were a few things that really stood out about this industry in particular. So number one is there are intrinsics to this industry that make it great. So at McKinsey & Company, I worked a long time ago at McKinsey helping businesses. We said that, it's management is really important and can do a whole lot to a business. But if you're swimming in a fast lane, in a lane that's growing, in a lane that has a lot of excitement, data shows that you will outperform a better team in a slow swim lane. So you want an industry that's growing. This is an industry, I think it's like 4 to 7% of Americans have had Botox or a neuromodulator. It's tiny, so there's so much room left. The effects are phenomenal, whether it be neuromodulators, whether it be lasers. You can see the difference. You can feel the difference. Patients love the results. That is a fast swim lane, growing 15% year over year. I think that's the AmSpa number to date. No matter what you do, if it's a fast lane, that's going to help. And that's the, factor number one that's really exciting about the space. Factor number two are margins. I used to work in a much tighter margin business. Margin gives you the ability to make mistakes and learn. In a business like Amazon that has very narrow margins, if they screw up a delivery, their next 5 to 10 deliveries are the cost to refund that one delivery they screwed up. Imagine you did this in med spa. You make one mistake and your next 10 treatments, and a mistake could be anything. You're patient, you're free. Exactly. You wouldn't make any money. So here, something could go wrong. Like for whatever reason, the patient might not be happy with the treatment, and you're still, or you can test something, a new promotion tactic to see if it works, and you'll still actually make some money on that transaction if you do things right. So that's exciting. Typical margins in the industry around 70%. That brings you close to software margins. So that's exciting. The third thing is that there is a massive difference between an amazing med spa and a mediocre med spa. And that's what gets me the most exciting. That's where people come into play. In our portfolio, we have some of the largest med spas in the country, many of which are well over $20 million of revenue, which med spa is huge. There is a huge difference on how those med spas run and operate versus, some of the people that we're helping. Our smallest med spa is around 2.5 million of revenue. Massive difference between capabilities and what they do. It's not because people are good or bad in terms of they mean well, but just how operationally clean their businesses are. And that's something that can be taught. It's something that can be passed down. It can be replicated. And that's where there's a huge growth driver. So for all of those who are, closer to that 2 million than the 20 million, do not worry. There are definitely things you can do. I mean, it's partially why people come to you, Terry. You're so good at getting people from that 2, up to the 20. But that really is people related, and that's where we can make a big difference. So I love good intrinsics. I can't control those. Like the market is growing or shrinking, that I have less control over. But there's other things like good people and ability to control, and that I can. And when you put those together, that makes the space exciting.
When I hit on number 2 and number 3, I always look at it from the perspective of what I do and how I'm able to help people, and or where some of the gaps or lack of business acumen is lacking. We know that this industry lacks the business fundamentals of how to do it. How do we get to this 20 million? Because if the average med spa, not even plastic surgery, is doing just that 2 million and profit margins are 20%, a lot of what I find is people just don't even understand. They don't even know what their margins are and or should be. And so when you are either looking at a business or thinking that these margins should be at this 70%, what do you find are the biggest, if we're looking at it two ways, these practices that you would potentially consider purchasing or partnering with, and or ones you're like, this is a hot mess, but we can fix it, and then what do we need to do to fix it?
Yeah, great question. The way that I think about it is I use the P&L or profit and loss statement to guide me as to where there's opportunity with the clinic. And it also helps understand how well it's managed. So with the total top revenue, I think the first thing that's important to look at is how have they priced their product? And revenue breaks down into three buckets, three sub-buckets. Number one is pricing. And then the other two are volume related. One of them is new customer growth, and the second one is retention. And if you take price and you multiply it by how many new customers and you multiply it by how many times those customers come to you in their lifetime, you get revenue. So it's like an equation. Everything goes back to an equation. So step one, I look at price and I say, hey, are they well priced in the industry? And pricing is not just the retail price, but if you're discounting. So, I was at a clinic that their retail price is $14 and they were discounting Botox to sub $10. And when you do that and the owner didn't realize what was going on, it might sound like a lot. Well, hey, I'm buying, Botox for, let's say it's $6 a unit. Oh, there's $4 a margin there. Well, yeah, but you had to pay your provider. You have to pay rent. You have so many other expenses before they go with their total cost is $11 and they're losing money. So price is a really easy one to miss, but if you set it well on pricing and promotion, you got to nail it. And then revenues, how often are their customers coming back? That tells a lot about a clinic. Are your customers coming back frequently or not? There's definitely tactics you can do against it. Then we go below the revenue line. So the next line is cost of goods sold. Generally, cost of goods sold is around 30%. Factors that can affect it is your mix. Mix is how much injectables to retail to energy devices, and each one has a different profit margin. There's a healthy mix there. And, for clinics who are only doing injectables, there's so much opportunity on the energy devices. Please don't sell yourself short. Get in there. Spend time, speak to people like Terry to figure out what energy devices are coat hangers and which ones are amazing devices. But, there's huge margin to be had there. The biggest mistake we find is inventory mismanagement. I'm working with a couple clinics right now that either didn't have an inventory system or didn't spend a lot of time on it. Just to give everyone a sense, the cost of inventory mismanagement can be 10% of revenue. It's outrageous. So if you're making $1 million a year, you could see inventory mismanagement could easily be costing you $100,000 per year. And it might sound crazy. That's where we see huge problems and huge opportunities.
And I love the, not simplicity, but for somebody, right, who isn't skilled in this area, that was a great breakdown. Let's talk about number 3, because you're right. God, I have been in this space for, I'm going to age myself, literally 20 years, both in the Fortune 500 side. I own the med spa. As you know, I had the consulting, I have Apex. And we know the same core things come up in any survey. It's culture and leadership, lack of training, lack of the data. And it's the 3 buckets that break down and then again are so critically applicable to somebody wanting an exit. If those are broken, and then there's a whole host of things when you start to break down in each of those categories. But when you said that there's a massive difference in med spas and you put the people, it's fascinating because clearly, again, I teach on this too. And I remember one of my original investors, my private equity original investor had said to me, Terry, if you get into Harvard and don't go, it's not Harvard's fault. And I say that because I'm humbled and honored by the work that we do. We know that we can give people the training, the tools, the resources, the coaching. But if they don't do it because there is a lack of management or culture or leadership or execution or accountability, what am I going to do? And it hurts me when I know that we are able to provide these clients with the training and the tools and the resources and the coaching and the data and the how-to playbook. But if they lack that leadership and management and culture that I can't control, it's hard. It's hard. And so what have you found? Is there any magic fairy dust of these practices that are doing it well? And what would your feedback be for the tribe and for people listening that this is not a joke, right? If you are in this business, if you own a med spa or a plastic surgery or both, you have to want a desire to have an exit strategy. And in order to do that, we have to get the house in order. This isn't just a game here, and you can't work till you're 90, and you can't have turnover that's high, and or to Dan's point earlier, a mediocrity practice. This isn't the business that we're in. We're in the business to serve patients so that they have great outcomes. Number one, first and foremost, right? Safety and outcomes, but number two, profitability. This shit isn't I say it often. This isn't a nonprofit organization. And when this isn't giving somebody their job description and you hope they read it and know what to do. It's so much more than that tied to the training. So Dan, what are your thoughts if you could shed some light there?
First off, there is no fairy dust here. I mean, if you have some, please send it my way. So one thing I will say that's funny is we spend an incredible amount of time and resources on it and learning about it. And we don't have the perfect answer today, but we have a lot of good answers and we know what works and we know when a lot of good things work and not, and we're still testing more things out. So Dr. Jay Burns is one of our culture champions. We do an engagement survey with all of our clinics every quarter, and that gives us a really good baseline as to which clinics are performing well and performing poorly. And one of the coolest things is financial performance is directly linked to cultural performance. The two, they have a correlation coefficient that is very close to 0.9, which for those data nerds, you'll know what I'm saying, but for those who aren't related to data, very, very highly correlation between clinics that have good culture and good financial. So what are some things that we do, or what are things that we see in clinics that are performing well culturally? Number one is the owner. If the owner treats their staff like garbage, your culture will suck. We'll stop. Just stop there. I've spoken to one person who says, well, the staff gets to choose the music. That's good, but that's not the difference between good and bad culture. There's a lot of different things that are important in culture, and it has to be constant. You have to constantly be thinking about it to make sure it's nurtured well. So, we look at culture three ways. Something's called deep culture. You have hard culture and soft culture. Soft culture are like the things you get, perks, lunches provided every Friday if the clinic does that. Those are soft culture points. They matter, but funny enough, they have the lowest link to actually good culture. Hard culture is the things we say. So our vision, our focus, what areas we target. When we have staff meetings and get everyone together and we talk about these things, has a much bigger impact on culture, but it's not the highest. The most important is deep culture, which is things we do. And people really hone into those things we do. So how we treat someone else in a tough situation. The saying I always have is, you can make a mistake once. There's tons of other mistakes. No need to make the same mistake a second time. And you'd be shocked at how many times I'll hear a doctor will berate a staff member because they made a mistake. And I get it. You're dealing with someone's health and life there. You want to make sure that you're not killing someone, but very little of what we do can kill someone. It's so important to teach and create that culture so someone feels safe, that they feel relaxed. What you actually see is when that's the case, they make less mistakes, not more. They're not afraid and they're not, impinged on that side. So, how can you use those three tools and using all three of them to build culture in your clinic? And that's what we strive to do, is help create a budget and a plan so that you can do all three. And you don't, very often we just see clinics saying, oh, well, I give them all kinds of free food and stuff like that. And they just assume, well, that's good culture. That's not going to cut it. And that generally does not lead to solid performance.
It's a struggle. If you think about practice managers, so whether you're the owner, doctor, provider, or you have one of those, obviously, and then you have a practice manager. And they could be great. They could have been a manager in another, type of, business function in the past, but perhaps not understand the space. Or they've been working in it and they only know what they know. And then we're trying to either create this new culture, but, if the blind's leading the blind, how do we train them to really be passionate and fully invested versus looking at this as a job? I say you're clocking in and out 9 to 5 and who gives a shit, because that's really not what this aesthetic business is. It's not a 9 to 5 job at all. And yet have them taught what is the right thing to do outside of vision, mission, management skills, and then what their roles are, and then what KPIs are, to your point, tied to those roles. So there's transparency. How do you work through that, Dan?
You need someone, there's certain things that you can provide, right? Like compensation structure would be an example where if your office manager's comp is not tied to the performance of your clinic, you're missing something, right? It doesn't have to be 100% of their salary, but there should definitely be a link financially to incentivize them. And, generally my advice is use the hardest thing for them to cheat, which is profitability. There's all kinds of different metrics and profitability, you're either profitable or you're not, and how profitable you are. And the accountant is kind of the judge at the end of the day. It's a really good way for them to feel like an owner. But the other things to factor in, number one, is does this person act like an owner? Are they intrinsically motivated? And I think you've all seen that. You walked in and you've heard someone, generally at the front desk, like, hello, how can we help you? And it's just like, all the energy is gone. If that's your office manager, you can't expect that office manager is going to get the troops motivated and get them moving. And potentially that person's in the wrong role. I mean, it doesn't mean that they have to be fired, but what are they good at? If they're good at analytics and data and crunching, then that's okay. But that's generally not an office manager. That can be either assistant office manager, or that can be a different role depending on the size of the clinic. Your office manager needs to get the troops moving, especially if you're not available or not around, if you're providing care, that they have to be able to talk and animate and be extroverted on that side. And on the flip side, they still need to have some idea of numbers and metrics, because you want them to look at a dashboard and say, that's not working well. Like, shoot, I can go improve that. So, are they motivated intrinsically? Do they have that, oomph factor to get the troops motivated and your teams going? And then do they have a little bit of numbers? They don't have to be rocket science. They don't have to be, ounce, but just enough so they can look at a number sheet and away they go. And if they have those, the rest can be taught. You can teach them what good numbers look like. You can teach them how to motivate the troops, what to say, what not to say. But if they're not excited to get going with, you probably have the wrong person in the role. And that's where there's a little bit of work that can be done.
When we think about exactly what you just said, you were talking about this intrinsic, again, this motivation. And then we know we all have faced this. I did as well when I had it, but we have people working there that don't buy into the Kool-Aid. But yet they've been there a long time. They do their job. Maybe it's a provider generating revenue, and we're scared to let those people go and fire them. They don't have the vision, the mission, the philosophy. They don't believe, right? They're there doing it, and we should let them go. It's a scary place to be, to feel like you're going to lose revenue, and or somebody that's contributing, and or just this meaty-ass ochre person, because you're like, what am I going to do? And we know those are cancers and they should be let go. And there's always a better way to build the house later, but it's that scary place to be. What are your thoughts?
So, we have quite good data on this one. We have to do. Step one is, I'd say, bucket your people, or I like to bucket them into 3 buckets: 1, 2s, and 3s. 3s are your rock stars. They don't just drink Kool-Aid. They make Kool-Aid and pass it out to everyone else.
I love it.
They're excited. They come in with a smile. They get people moving. Really easy to put people into that bucket. Then the next two bucket, your twos. These are your people who they come, they do their job. They're neither good nor bad. They're not stirring shit up. They're not causing trouble. They don't have drama, but they're not necessarily creating Kool-Aid. That's fine. And generally, about 80% of your staff are going to fit in that bucket. The big problem are your ones. Your ones are the people that cause drama or they stir stuff up. And where it becomes a real problem, which is a good example, we have a clinic, our number one injector was a number one. She lived for drama and she would poke every single bear she could poke at the clinic. And it was awful. And the culture was terrible. And the owner, of course, we didn't get a chance to see all of this. I learned we now do some surveys before we go in, but we didn't do that work. And we get to the clinic and, what you thought was a great clinic, all of a sudden you realize, oh my goodness, there are culture problems here. And, lucky for us, we have the financials to do it. The doctor really was just pulling his hair and saying, hey, I love my clinic, but the culture is awful. Like, what do I do here? And we decided to let this person go. And this is over $1 million a year injector. So, you guys all have that and you know what that is. That's all your star person. It was painful for him. Now, fast forward 18 months, we have 2 new injectors who are phenomenal, both of which doing over $1 million each. The culture is completely 180. People are happy, excited. Revenue is growing 30% month over month versus prior year. Like, this clinic is firing at all cylinders. We could never have gotten here had we not made the move before. And the move is, again, bucket people into the right categories. It's pretty simple to do. It's not being mean. It's like, literally, this person causing trouble. And if they're causing trouble and they're negative, the right decision is always don't have them there. Because yes, it's a lot of money. It's short term. You're going to come back. You're going to find great people. They're going to work. It doesn't work in the industry. It doesn't work for your team. You're going to lose so much on the other people. That's going to cost you a fortune to replace them. It's just not worth it. So anyways, it's a good anecdote, but we see that time and time again. It's worth replacing them. Just get ready. It's like 4 or 5 months of quote unquote hell, and then you recover and you're good to go again.
I love it. And you guys, I really want you to just sit with that for a second, because if you are facing this challenge right now in your business, and as we approach 2024, and you really are looking at cleaning the house and getting your foundation solid and making some hard decisions, I think, again, there's always the better way to build that house. And to Dan's point, you're going to come out exponentially stronger on every level. All right, Dan, let's get down and dirty. So I know, again, we have, I don't even know, probably 500 or 600 people now on our Apex platform. And obviously we had, hundreds of private clients before. And that's the topic. Terry, what do I do? Who do I talk to? When can I sell? Am I ready? So, and people get nervous. Some people could be in their early 40s and they're like, oh God, I'm too young and I want to do this and that. And we've sent people to you. It's always like, well, let's be open to a conversation to understand. So when is the right time for someone to think about selling? And is there a right time?
There are definitely better times and worse times to do it. Each person will have a different time. I would say when is the right time? Here are the factors I would say to you. Number one, are you still having fun? If you're not having fun in this industry, your clinic is going to feel it. This is probably a good time. You're going to want to find the right partner because it's going to mean a lot. Different partners will ask for different things, but it's if you're not having fun, definitely something to do. Number two, are you still growing? It's a lot easier to sell something on the up than on the down. So if your practice is in decline, it might not be the right time. You might actually have to restart it and get it moving again before you want to sell. You will be hit with a discount, unfortunately, instead of a premium for negative growth. 3 is, have you prepared yourself for the sale? If you haven't, it doesn't mean you can't sell in 6 months to 12 months, but there's some work you need to do in advance to get yourselves there. So a good example of this is your accounting. If your accounting is a mess and you have no idea what's going on, get some help. Get that cleaned up ahead of time. You don't want to find these bogeys like missing inventory when you're in the sale process, because that, like, I've seen it before. We've had groups come to us after a failed sale with another group where, the offer was dropped 30 to 40% because they uncovered all kinds of things in their accounting. Like that's too late. That's going to be, you're going to feel like crap if that happens. So there's some stuff that can be done. So timing wise, step 1, get your house in order. Step 2, be in the right mindset. Step 3, and some people ask about this, like, what about control? What if I'm not ready to lose control? What I would say there is that's more a matter of which group you join. There are some groups that offer more control to you. There's some groups that offer less control to you. It matters much more who you join than if you join or not join. Hopefully that helps figure out, when is the right time to join. The last thing I'll say is if you've been around for less than 3 years, it's too soon. People are going to give you a discount because it's too new. And even if you're growing really quickly, it's too new. A lot of that could be, quote unquote, fake growth. You get a big premium for being around for 5 years plus.
Okay, I love that. Okay, so timing, Dan kind of just said, right, are you having fun? Is your business still growing? And are you prepared for the sale? So let's dive in a little bit deeper, Dan, in that respect, because what if people don't know what they don't know? To your point, you talked about the accounting, and what we see often, even with some of the people that are KOLs that you would think is the top echelon of the freaking food chain. And I'll look at the P&L and it's a chart of accounts is a disaster, right? Things aren't allocated right. It's in the right place, above the line, below the line. Oh my God. And then you have to wonder, how did they've been functioning all this time? And then perhaps, look, I'm sure, again, you come from the accounting world. There are people that really understand this space versus just a typical accountant who might think that they know, but then they don't know our industry. And so what if someone thinks they have a decent business? The timing could be right. Maybe they want to have a conversation with you, but they don't know that this other stuff is a mess. Is that just part of the due diligence phase? Because we'll get to the valuation question of like, is that going to all come out? Because I know that we uncover it when we do that gap in, our practice assessment. We're like, oh my God, and I never say that we find out what's wrong. I really try to position it in the positive, that we find out the areas of opportunity to fix.
Yeah, you kind of nailed it there. It will always come out. Any practice will probably get what's called a quality of earnings assessment done on them whenever there's a transaction like ours. Quality of earnings, or a Q of E, is done by a third-party accounting firm typically, and they will get down and dirty in your books. It's like a colonoscopy. And they're going to, it'll feel like it too, unfortunately, to a certain degree. Actually, it'll feel like it if your books are messy. If your books are clean, we have a group who's joining us. I've never seen books this clean. It was the fastest QB you've ever seen. In less than a week, we were done. The owner had like very strict rules on how she organized her books and what she expected from her team. Everything was in the right place. And the big areas are inventory and prepaids. So like gift cards and packages. Those are the big areas where people, screw up. She had them nailed. She had good records. Everything was like where it should be. It's not hard to get it right, but there has to be consistency there. So normally what I would say is, if you're worried, like you'll know, in the back of your head, you'll know my book's clean or my book's messy. If you know that it's messy, go speak to someone like Terry. Go speak to your accountant. If your accountant isn't versed in this, find an accountant who is. It is important to get some expert help. It can materially, the cost you'll pay if it's $5,000, $10,000 is much smaller than the impact it'll have on the valuation of your business. So do get help. That would be my recommendation. It's probably negative to me because I'll get a discount at the valuation. Well, it's better for you, and you should. And as you prepare for sale, generally my 4 tips are: get your last 2 to 3 years of financials, generally 3 years of financials together. Make sure they're clean and make sure they're growing. If they're not growing, again, unless you really hate your life and you want to sell, it's gonna impact your valuation. 2, make sure your people are in place, have contracts for all of them. In many cases, people don't have contracts, they don't have, in certain states you can't, but in states where you're allowed to have non-competes, non-solicits, like get those done as soon as possible. If you don't, start getting any new employee coming in with a non-compete, change your clause. It matters. That affects your valuation. It also affects your life. If people have those, they're not going to be so quick to leave. 3, get support. someone like a Terry who is not biased. The other side of the party is always, as much as I try, and I try not to be biased, I'm biased. I have to be. It's just the way it works. Get someone in your court who's going to protect you, but make sure they know what they're doing. We've had family lawyers who know nothing about M&A and know nothing about med spas cost 2 to 3 times more than a leading accounting firm in this practice, because they just have to relearn everything. Just because they're a professional, an accountant or a lawyer, does not mean they understand this industry and M&A. You need someone who understands those. It'll save you a lot of money if they don't have to learn off your back. And if they make one mistake, that can cause huge, huge problems. And then last one, discussion. Speak a heck of a lot with other people in the industry. They will tell you who to avoid and who to go for. Word gets out when someone has a lot of failed sales right now that has a lot of failed sales. Word is getting out on them. You'll uncover that right away, right? An LOI from this group isn't worth a whole lot because half the LOIs they give out, they don't follow through on, and the transaction never happens. So you don't want to go through all that pain just to get to the finish line, and they're like, "Oh, we don't have enough money to make the deal happen. Sorry." So speak to people. If you do those 4 things, you'll be in good shape.
Oh my God, I love it. And I'm gonna piggyback on for a self-serving comment right there, because it really is just from a level of integrity. And again, being in this industry for so long, we pride ourselves on the fact that we've walked the walk and talked the talk. I didn't just read a book and I'm up there pretending to coach practices on what to do. And I appreciate that comment, Dan, because there is a lot of wannabes out there, or they say I'm a consultant, or, they worked in a practice, and to no knock and no disrespect to anybody out there. But, again, I'm if I have cancer, I'm going to go to the Mayo Clinic, or I'm going to pick, I'm going to pick the best doctor. If I want a facelift, I'm going to pick the best facial plan, whatever it is. I'm going to do my due diligence and my research to get the best person. And I think that sometimes this space, again, I say it with so much love, is that they get sucked into somebody saying they can do these things and promise to do these things or know how to do these things. And then they're like, God, shit, I paid this consultant and it didn't work. Well, have they ever sold anything, right? Have they ever managed a practice, right? Have they ever worked in it? And it's just sometimes hiring the wrong person and then feeling jaded to spend the money. But to your point, I look at it now that we're not really consultants, but we are management. We're not an MSO, but if we want to get you, if I can double your EBITDA, okay, and we've proven to do that, why would you not want that? And then that cost to us, or that investment to us, or anybody you work with, right, is going to be a fraction of what the outcome could be when you go to sell it. So that's our goal. So let's talk, Dan, of valuation. We get this a lot too, right? Who does the valuation? How do clinics get valued? And what does that process look like?
If you think about valuation, you're going to hear this word a lot. Actually, you're going to hear 2 words a lot. You're going to hear EBITDA. If you're not familiar with what that is, that's basically the equivalent of profit or cash flow. What it stands for is earnings before interest, tax, depreciation, and amortization. Now, note, every group will have a different answer for what your EBITDA is. There's no dictionary that says this is the exact way to calculate. So that's the first thing that's really important. And then the second word you're going to hear a lot is multiple. And the way the math works is very simple. If your EBITDA is $1 million and your multiple is, I'm going to pick a fake number, is 5, just because math is easy. 1 million times the multiple of 5 is $5 million, and that's your valuation. Okay. So now here's the most important part. How do you get those 2 numbers, or how does someone like me come up with those 2 numbers? So each group has a different way of calculating multiples and how much they're willing to pay for a clinic. So while I can't give you the exact things, there's no rocket science here. Things that make your business more attractive, and this is where quality of revenue is important, things that give me confidence that what revenue you have today will come back tomorrow will increase your multiple. So I'll give you a really easy example of that. What would be something that you don't buy very often? Okay, this water bottle. I'm holding a water bottle in my hand. If I bought that water bottle, what's the likelihood that I buy the exact same water bottle tomorrow? The answer is probably pretty low. So the quality of earning is very low, and the multiple I'll pay on a company that sells water bottles is pretty low because the chance that that same customer buys the water bottle tomorrow isn't very good. Take Netflix. If I subscribe to Netflix this month, what's the chance that I'm probably going to pay my Netflix bill next month? It's probably pretty high. So that has a very high quality of earnings. So that's the difference of a high multiple and a low multiple, is which ones have higher and lower. And the factors that we look at in this business would be, how many providers do you have? If you have one provider or you have 10 providers, which one is safer? If you have one provider, that provider could disappear and all of a sudden you have 0 providers. If you have 10 providers, any one provider disappears, it's not so bad. So number of providers is one thing. The state you're located in, funny enough, is the state growing or shrinking, or the region, the city, the location. A city that's growing, you're going to have, better trends. So we'll pay a higher multiple for that. If the city's shrinking, or if the city has really terrible employment laws for corporations, so no non-competes, no non-solicits, we'll pay less for that. Again, there's more risk to a buyer of your business. You can't necessarily affect that, but that'll affect you. 3, how much surgery for those who do plastic surgery and med spa. We really like buying the med spa because that's a real business. The surgery, it's a person, less a business. So just know those are some factors that we look at as we're thinking about valuation. The more your business is robust and the more it has these factors like higher med spa percentage, lots of providers, the more the multiple will pay for. Typically, just so people have an idea, multiples these days are, I've heard as low as 4 to 5x, and I've seen as high as 8 or 9x. It can depend on number of locations, number of providers, size. All of these factors are factored in there.
Okay, so is that something, Dan, that your firm does? Where do people, if they just wanted the valuation piece, are there people that do that? Do you guys do that?
Yeah, good question. So what I would say is, generally, it's companies like us who do the valuation for you. You'll also have brokers who can do it. People even, I don't know, Terry, if you guys do it, but groups like APX can do a valuation. They kind of know what the factors are anyways, and they'll be able to give you a range saying, hey, your clinic's worth between X and Y, and these are some factors that'll make it more to the X, or these are some factors that'll make it more.
Got it. Oh my God. I know we've been on this for 45 minutes. Like I said, we could talk for hours, and we're probably gonna have to do a series together. Couple last final questions. There is a lot of different people in the space, right? There's you. I won't even name other people. There's investment banking, there's brokers. Yeah. People get it twisted. Yeah. Where do I go? What do I do? Do I need a broker? Do I do this? Do I do that? And then different structures of different philosophies, to your point earlier in the conversation. What are some of those differences that people should think about and consider?
The first thing that generally is the most important side, once you've said, okay, I want to do this, is the level of control you want to have. So Cosmetic Physician Partners, or CPP, we provide a ton of control to the owner who's selling. And we're looking for owners who want to be partners. So we structure it where they have a lot of take in years 4, 5, 6, and onwards later on, where they can make far more money than some of the other groups. Some of the other groups are much more short-term focused, where they'll take over most of the control, but they'll give you a bigger payout up front. So really the decision is, am I looking for a buyout, or am I looking for a partnership? That's question number one. For our case, we are, probably the leaders on the partnership side. It's what we do. It's why people join us. Really important to think about. And that can also affect how much cash upfront versus how much cash you get in later years. The more you take upfront, generally, the less you get overall. So you might take, if your clinic's worth $5 million today, it probably is worth $10 million in 5 years. Do you want that $5 million, or are you more okay with taking a little bit more time but getting a much higher? So that's number one. Number two is the type of people in it. So community. Many groups, either if they buy you out, they don't really have community because they have a somewhat of a community, but it's not really tied together. Partnerships tend to have a much more of a community aspect, because they need the doctors or the owners to still be thoughtful about their business and act like owners. So the best way to do that is put them in touch with people, very closely with people who know how to run a business and can help them run their business. So again, for us, community is at the center of what we do. We have a ton of different ways that we do it. It's not just lip service. It is like ingrained every single week. There's events, there's activities that coach and teach and help your staff and teams. How we get better clinics is why we see such tremendous results. But that's a big part of, what separates groups. And then finally, it's the type of people. Spend as much time as you can getting to know them. It's a marriage. You do not want to get into a marriage with someone who, 3 weeks later, you're like, why did I do this? So, and history repeats itself. So ask for people in the group. The way that we do it is we give the list of every single partner that's part of CPP. We don't just cherry pick one or two names. And we're like, call anyone. And we've had clinics who call 12, 13, 20 different clinics. And when they hear the same story 20 times, you kind of get the sense like, okay, I know what I'm getting myself into. If the group is only giving you one name or they're not willing to give you names, that's like a red flag right there. So you hear those things, those are ways you should know whether you should be, going to the group or not. Again, speaking to groups like yourselves or certain brokers, certain accountants, your accountants might know, your lawyers might know, especially if it's like a legal firm that's in this field. A good example is like Verdadado. They're in this field. They kind of know the groups. They'll be able to help guide on stuff like that.
Oh, gosh, love it. Okay. And, as we're wrapping up this year, all right, we are down to the wire now into Q4, going into next year. I know we've hit on a lot of very fundamental, amazing points. I hope people are literally like, holy shit, there's a lot of stuff I either want to do or could do. And I always say, even when I get on stage and I lecture and when I do these podcasts, I always start off and everybody, they think it's hokey pokey, but it's like, really shut your eyes and, what is the why? Why are you here? Why do you do what you do? Why do you wake up every day? Why do you have your job? Like, what do you want for yourself? What do you want for your people? What do you want for your practice moving forward? And we have to just embrace that, even if it's hard and scary and, challenging right now. Let's embrace that change so that we can have financial freedom and you have a better practice. And so, Dan, as we wrap up, like, what are some of the helpful growth tips that you might give someone listening in terms of your successful clinics that you have? And it's a lot of them that they could do. And maybe it's one or two things that they can manage. And it's not this overwhelming, daunting thing that they could go into next year, or even as we wrap up this year, feeling a bit more confident than they might be today.
Yeah. The funny part is, I think you even said it, and this is something I see in most clinics. People create these like really big wish lists, like these Santa Claus lists that have 30 things they want. I'm a big proponent of focus. Do two things, max, get them right, and that gives you the right to do two more things. So keep it small, pick two things that are going to move the needle. If your inventory isn't in order, do that. If you haven't spoken with a big vendor of yours for neuromodulators recently, and you think it's a good time to renegotiate price, do that. If your staff, like we talked about before, you have a culture problem, that's one thing I would say. Don't do anything else. Just focus on that.
Yeah.
Pick one or max two things and solve those problems and have your whole team focused on it. And then two, my advice would be communicate. Communication, it's something that, is really important at CPP, especially when you have so many clinics, making sure all of that happens.
Yeah.
But you'd be shocked how many times that owners have all these great ideas and have all these wants in their head, and they don't share it with their team, and their team feels like employees, not like owners of the business. If you share those ideas with your team, it's incredible what people feel like when they feel like they're entrusted. So that would be the other one I would recommend as the year comes to a close. If you can communicate with your team and share that, you'd be shocked at what your team's able to do, and you'd see great results.
Oh God, I love this, Dan. I'm serious. I really think that we need to do a series together. This was really incredible, and I always learn from you as well. Thank you so much for being on this podcast and to discuss and give such valuable information. Again, I know that this is really one of the most hottest topics in the industry right now. Again, you are just such a valued, trusted, influential CEO in the space. So, Tribe, thank you again. You know that you tuning in, listening, being present, taking the information that we provide here on this podcast is so valuable to me. And if you are in any one of these positions, whether you are struggling again with the leadership, the culture, the training, the data, your accounting, whatever it is, I invite you to always reach out to me, DM me, reach out to us at the Apex Platform team. We would love to hear from you and help you solve some of these things. And then, if you are ready and wanting to have a conversation about your business or evaluation, Dan, where can people reach out to you directly? And I would highly encourage you, if you are ready and you fit some of these parameters that Dan has shared in terms of what his company is about, their philosophies, and what they're willing to do, and the type of partner you might be looking for, I highly encourage you to reach out to Dan. And where can, Dan, they find you?
Yeah, I would say 2 places. You can always reach out to us at info@cppclinics.com, cppclinics with an s.com. And we always answer that. I look at those emails regularly. Or if you want to speak to me directly, it's dschachter@cppclinics.com. I do spend a ton of time answering emails. I find if you give, you'll always get back, and it's been super rewarding. So if anyone has questions about any of the things we spoke about, don't hesitate to either message me directly or message my team, and we're happy to help you there.
He just dropped the gold, guys. So I would make sure you put that number, that email in your phone. You're going to want it. Thank you again, Dan, for being on the In Touch with Terry show. I'm again so honored to work with you, to know you, to call you a friend, and again so blessed at what you've provided today for everybody. So thank you guys for tuning in and listening. If you loved this episode, I would please invite you to share it with your friends, your colleagues, your peers. Leave me a message. Your feedback always helps us continue to provide great information for you. And that's a wrap. So we'll see you on the next episode of In Touch with Terry. Ciao, guys.
Thanks for listening to In Touch with Terry. We invite you to schedule a discovery call with our Apex team. The link to apexplatform.com can be found in the show notes. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode of In Touch with Terry.